It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Tuesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. It's Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control what we discuss. A lot of great stuff to get to today. Let's get started here. The first one and the first couple are regarding James Cook. And so let's get into these. The first one comes from Tom. Tom says, I've heard people saying James Cook doesn't have the ideal size to run the ball. He weighs 13 pounds less than Singletary and 16 less than Moss. I don't buy it. Singletary ran a 4.67 40, although he seems faster now, and Moss a 4.65. Cook ran a 4.42. Does this additional speed compensate for the 13 to 16 pounds of additional weight carried by Singletary and Moss? Doesn't Cook's quickness and speed give him an advantage running the ball? I think he's going to be harder to tackle because they'll be trying to hit him from bad angles because he'll be able to break through the holes a lot quicker than either of the other backs. Some of his runs at Georgia are incredible. I don't know about his contact balance. I think they have to hit him in order for that to be a major factor. They'll be looking at the back of his jersey, wondering how he got past them. I think James Cook is going to be a star both as a running back and as a receiver. I was thrilled when they picked him. All right, so first of all, I don't think your numbers in terms of weight are accurate. Going back to the last verified measurement that we had on all three of these players, again, verified measurement at the NFL Scouting Combine, James Cook, 5'11", 199. Devin Singletary, 5'7 and a half, 203. So there's only 4 pounds of difference between Cook and Singletary. And then Zach Moss is 5'9", 223. So that's 24 pounds difference between Cook and Moss. But I think what really stands out here about the size isn't necessarily the weights. It's that James Cook is 5'11". He's clearly the tallest. Singletary 5'7 and a half. Zach Moss 5'9". 5'11". So he's the tallest and the lightest. He's got a lean frame. He's not very dense when it comes to how he carries his weight. He's long and lean, tall and skinny, which is different than being 5'7", 203. 5'11", 199 compared to 5'7", 203. There's a different body type. There's a different composition. You're a lot more compact. You're a lot more dense. Cook isn't that. He's very skinny. If you look at him from the waist down, he's very, very thin. And so that's where you get the concerns about him being a between the tackles ball carrier. Nobody's questioning his ability to execute wide zone and push the perimeter and work off tackle and catch the football. Is he going to be much of a factor running in between the tackles? Because he doesn't have the type of frame that translates well to doing that. 5'11", 199. He's long and lean. Now, that doesn't dismiss his ability to run the football. I think he's going to be a good runner of the football. But he's just not going to be a short yardage guy or a goal line guy or a player that you're going to want to ask to grind out tough yards. Perimeter runner, speed to the perimeter, receiving threat. And the density of his frame is very different than Singletary and Moss, even if Singletary is only 4 pounds more and Moss is 24 pounds. The body compositions are very, very different. So I'm very excited about Cook. I think he's going to be a really good player for the Bills. He's just not the type of player that you're going to ask to bang the football between the tackles. He's not a battering ram or a hammer between the tackles. But his speed, like you brought up, his speed is going to be an asset. He's going to break pursuit angles. He's going to challenge tacklers differently than the other backs. Like, all that stuff is going to help him. But it's just about how he's going to be used. It's going to be different. Needs to be different. Next one comes from Max, who says, a question occurs to me after listening to your pod with Bruce regarding running backs. Y'all talked about the outside running skills of Cook and the between tackles and the between the tackle skills of the guy Bruce would have preferred. And I don't remember who it was either. I wonder if those skills are as interchangeable as the discussion suggested, at least to me. Oh, he had a Rashad White out of Arizona State. Just hit me. For instance, is O-line play more capable of overcoming deficiency in inside versus outside running scheme? In short, my hypothesis is that James Cook has more rare of a skill set and scheme, O-line play, the way defenses have to respect Josh, can maximize his more limited between the tackle running abilities. What do you think? 100%, Max. It's a lot harder to find a running back that can run off tackle, that has speed, that has elite pass catching ability, than it is to find a guy that's 215, 220, that can run downhill and bang between the tackles. The hard to find skill set is Cook. The easy to find, the guy you can find every single year, is that complementary player to just run the ball as a hammer between the tackles. The Damian Pierces, the Tyler Algiers, those guys you can draft every single year in the 4th or 5th round. Ramondre Stevenson, these players are always available. The hard one to find are the elusive players with outside rushing ability, with receiving skills that bring speed. With you all the way here, Max. Next one comes from Spencer, who says, when evaluating how well any team did in the draft, how much weight do you assign to landing spot as opposed to your player profile or their estimated round value? For example, if you have a 3rd round grade on a player and he's taken in the 2nd round by a team that is a good scheme fit for that player and has a need for that style of player, does your grade change? I'm thinking specifically of James Cook potential impact in the Bills offense. Or what about when Star Lotulelei was first signed and we acknowledged he was somewhat overpaid, but it was a premium position in McDermott's defense? Does premium position in his scheme or a potential perfect fit for maximum impact on offense or defense change your actual draft/free agency grade? Yeah, absolutely. And I have 2 things that I want to say in response to this. First, just compare my overall big board that I released for the 2022 NFL draft to the Bills specific big board that I released for the 2022 NFL draft. They're vastly different because scouting in a vacuum is way different than scouting for a specific team with specific needs and things that they value in players and things that they need. So vacuum scouting, very, very different than team scouting. Very different. And so there are players that in a vacuum I might say, this is a 2nd round player. But because of the dynamics of the team and the player, it's worth it for that team to pick them earlier. And so, yes, I absolutely think about that when reflecting on draft grades and how I consider what a team accomplished. The other part of this that I want to mention is how we do this at the Draft Network. And I think this is a good way to do it. I don't love everything about it because it doesn't necessarily take into account what we just discussed. But what we do is we take the trade value chart. And so if you're not familiar, the NFL has a trade value chart. There's several different iterations of it, but conceptually they're all the same, where there's a number value assigned to every pick, 1 through 262, however many picks there were. And the first pick is worth 3,000 points. The second is worth 2,200. The third is worth 1,900, whatever it is. And it incrementally goes down the further you get down the board. And so what we do to look at teams and how closely they draft regarding our boards is we then assign that same number value to the players on our board, 1 through whatever, right? So the first player is worth 3,000 points, the second 2,200, so on and so forth. And so then you take the difference, right? So if a player we have ranked number 10 goes number 1, and the 10th pick, and this, I'm just throwing out numbers here, the 10th pick is worth 1,000 points, and the first pick is worth 3,000 points. That's a net difference of 2,000. And so then we go through and we figure out the net difference between how the trade value chart reflects the draft position versus the position on our board. And then we do an adjustment for rounds, right? It doesn't matter as much if you reach in the 5th, 6th, or 7th rounds compared to if you reach in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. And so there's a weighted piece of it that considers where draft picks are made, because again, it's different. It matters differently at certain points in the draft. So that's conceptually how we choose to look at it through that lens, right? When we're considering how well teams drafted in relationship to our specific big boards. Whittle says, based on our schedule, do you think Buffalo wins more than 11 games, or is that about right? Based on Trey's injury and our schedule, do you want Buffalo to sign a veteran cornerback or let these young guys take their lumps? All right, so 2 questions here. I would like to see the Bills sign a veteran cornerback. If Tre White's not going to be ready to start the season, sign an AJ Bouye or a Kyle Fuller, somebody to help you get through that time. But, whenever Tre White's ready to go, I want to see Tre White on one side. I want to see Kyer Elam opposite of him. Now, as for the schedule, and if I think 11 games is about right, I think that's fair. And, everyone's going to go through and pick every game, right? Win, loss, win, 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 loss, whatever they're going to do. I don't know. Like, it never goes that way. So the way that I'm kind of looking at the schedule and thinking about the Bills' win total is I think about the different chunks of the schedule, the first 6 games before the bye, the next 8 games coming out of the bye, and then the final 3. And then I think through the first 6 games, the Bills will probably go 4-2. That 8-game stretch coming out of the bye, I think they'll go 6-2. And then over the last 3, I think they'll go 2-1. And so if that happens, it's 12-5. Now, I think there's a chance the Bills could go 4-3 in the first 7. And then, I think the next 7 games after that, I think they could go 6-1, to be honest with you. And I think they could win all 3 of the last. So there's some fluctuation in there, but I think 11 or 12 wins is about what I'm expecting from this team in 2022. Folks, let me tell you about Built Bars, and I want to tell you about the birthday cake puffs. I actually ate one just before I started recording this podcast. They're so good. They're healthy for you. 150 calories, 16 grams of protein, and they're absolutely delicious. And look, these puffs, they're phenomenal. I've been talking about them. I love the Built Bars, but the puffs are awesome. And I was a little bit cautious to try them because I'm not a big marshmallow guy. And that's what a puff is. It's a protein. It's a marshmallow protein bar, chocolate covered marshmallow. And I'm not a marshmallow guy, but these, I'm not sure whatever Built's doing, they're phenomenal. They taste so good. They're healthy for you. And the Built Puffs have become my favorite thing that Built produces. And they've got churro flavor, banana cream, right now the birthday cake, and it's phenomenal. Again, 16 grams of protein, low calorie. They're delicious. You got to try them out. Head to built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. No business owner wants to deal with the hassle of energy decisions. You just want your business to run smoothly and pay a fair rate for power. But coming off the back of one of the highest priced winners in the last decade, if your business was on a purely variable or market rate, you paid out the nose. Many New York business owners switch suppliers out of frustration, but unless they chose alternative pricing options, they're still at risk for a January repeat. Catalyst Power partners with you or your trusted energy consultant to produce a power supply plan that fits your business and your market risk tolerance. We have a suite of options customizable to your business's needs, including options that bundle with or focus on renewable energy. Right now in New York, we're offering an on-site solar solution for your business that requires zero installation, maintenance, or material purchase costs. That's right, no CapEx costs for you. To sweeten the deal, qualified businesses could be eligible for up to 6 months of at-cost energy supply from Catalyst Power. Go to catalystpower.com/lockedonbills to learn more. All right, we got more to get to. Let's keep rolling. The next one comes from Smooth. Smooth says, when projecting an edge player's ability to set the edge from college to the NFL, what physical traits are you looking for or prefer? Love this question. So a lot of things. First of all, I think good edge setters at defensive end, they have very good block recognition skills. And at its very simple form, there's only so many things that an offensive lineman can do to you as a defensive lineman. They can pass block, they could pull, they could reach block you, or they can drive block you. Pretty much it. Or they can down block. So that's like 5 things. So first of all, your ability to recognize those things matters a lot in you becoming a good edge setter. Specifically, when we're talking about setting the edge, you're either going to get reach blocked or you're going to be drive blocked. And you have to understand the difference and feel the difference. If somebody's going to drive block you, just try to block you out and widen that gap, well, then you have to fight pressure with pressure, squeeze down, and minimize their ability to create that lane. If they're trying to reach block you, which means they're trying to lateral step and hook you and pin you back inside for a perimeter run outside of you, you have to understand that that's coming, and you have to work back over top of that block and not allow them to get leverage on you. You need to maintain your outside leverage. So your understanding of those two blocks is critical right off the bat. And the quicker you can recognize those things, the quicker you can respond, and that has to become second nature for you. So then from there, once you have the recognition piece down and you know what to do, how well do you play with extension? Can you extend your arms and play with extension to keep that blocker out of your frame and put yourself in position to hold them at bay, but also disengage and make a tackle? So can you play with extension? And then it comes down to your core strength and your lower body strength to be able to anchor at the point of attack. So your hand power is going to be tested, how well you can get extension, fit your hands, and keep them placed on that blocker. You have the core strength to sustain that and play with leverage and not get ridden out of that gap, and the lower body strength to anchor and hold your ground. So it's the recognition skills, your response to different types of blocks, your ability to play with extension, and your overall functional strength to hold your ground and not get washed out of gaps or hooked and reached and washed down the line of scrimmage and giving up outside contain. So those are the components. That's what I'm looking for when I'm evaluating an edge player's ability to set the edge in college. Next one comes from Daniel, who says, I'm out here in Salt Lake City wondering what happens to the Bills if they lose to Kansas City for a third straight year to finish the season. Can you speculate for me? I know it's negative, but still stings from 13 seconds. Here's what I'll say about that. It'll suck. There's no question about that. That'd be a terrible way for the Bills' season to end, a third year in a row losing to the Chiefs in the playoffs. But there's no other option than to simply reload in the offseason and go back out there and compete. That's what you do. What are you supposed to do? Blow it up and say we can't beat the Chiefs and we're done. This was a fun ride and we're done? No, you go out there, you figure out what you need to do to improve your football team and go out there and compete. I don't think the gap's that big. I thought the gap in 2020 was big. And in 2021, it's clearly much less of a gap. And if there is a gap at all, the Bills beat them in week 6. And let's be honest, they should have beat them in the divisional round. So go ahead and lose that idea to overreact if they lose to Kansas City again. Because you simply reload, get your ass back out there and go and compete and try not to let it happen again. EPEA says, with all the new additions on defense, what would your ideal personnel formation and starting 11 be? So I have an answer to this, and I guess I'd be curious if there's any resistance to this. Does anybody disagree that this is that this is not the best 11 players the Bills can put on the field? So at defensive end, Von Miller and Greg Rousseau. Defensive tackle, Daquan Jones, the 1 tech, Ed Oliver, the 3. Milano and Edmonds at linebacker. Your corners, Kyer Elam, Tre White with Taron Johnson in the slot. Then Poyer and Hyde at safety. I think that's very straightforward. I would love to hear if you would disagree and why, what you would do differently, because I think that's pretty straightforward to me in terms of what the best personnel that the Bills can put on the field on defense is. Corey says, as Trey White gets further in his career, does his skill set translate into either stronger free safety? If so, he could be a nice option to keep him on the team long term since he's such an integral part of the defense. So I do think that Trey White can transition to safety eventually, but I don't think we're anywhere near having that conversation. I think Tre White is in a good spot to play corner for a very long time in this scheme. But if it does come down to it, I think he's an option to play safety, specifically free safety. I think he's got the coverage instincts, the route recognition skills, the communication skills, the ball skills to be a free safety and stay leveraged over top and take away throws down the field. I think he'd be a very good deep ball defender. However, and I've said this multiple times, and this shouldn't be a surprise. Like, I don't think this is a hot take at all. I think the tape reveals this. I don't think Tre White is a good tackler. I do not think Tre White is a good tackler at all. And so that comes into question more so as a strong safety, somebody that you're going to play low in the box, closer to the line of scrimmage, right? You'd want a better tackler, right? A Jordan Poyer type player. But even as a free safety, you still got to be able to tackle. And I don't think Tre White's a terrible tackler. I just don't think he's a consistent tackler. And so that'd be something I want to see improve for him to make that type of transition to safety if it ever happens, but also just that corner. Like, hey, dude, be a better tackler at corner. I think that's the one thing that about Tre White as an elite defensive player in the NFL. That's that one piece that I think is missing from his game with the consistency that I'd like to see it. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX, and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and right in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why would you choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? They have everything you can need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Make sure you write Locked On in their "How did you hear about us?" box so that we sent you. They have amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need over at rockauto.com. All right, we got a few more to get to today, and the next one is from Alexander, who says, Joe, I'm listening to this week's Herd Mentality, and currently you're in my ear talking about the Bills' run defense. Teams are going to try to run the ball to keep Josh Allen off the field. But it seems like with the addition of James Cook and Duke Johnson, the Ken Dorsey offense may switch to more of a run-heavy offense. Am I wrong with this assumption? Dable is not in the building, and Josh is known as a gunslinger. How many touches ultimately do you think our running backs will get this season, especially considering defenses will build themselves against Josh Allen's passing talent? So I don't predict that the Bills will become a run-heavy offense. I don't predict that at all. I think the Bills will still be a pass-aggressive offense. Now, will they run the ball a little bit more? I think that's probably reasonable. But I think part of the Bills' best script to win football games is getting leads, putting the other team in chase mode, and forcing them to be one-dimensional. You've heard Sean McDermott talk about this a lot. They want to make other teams one-dimensional. And the way that they can do that, scoring, getting leads. How do the Bills score? They throw the football. It's Josh Allen, right? So I think there's a good awareness to their best script, despite Brian Dable not being the offensive coordinator anymore. So I'm expecting a pass-heavy offense still. I'm hoping that the run game will be better late in games. I think the Bills will use the backs more in the passing game. And I think that the run scheme should be way better. I've talked about this several times where I thought the run scheme under Brian Dable had an identity crisis, where he didn't know if he wanted to be a gap run scheme or a zone run scheme. You have max offensive linemen that, some are better for zone, some are better for power. Some games you're heavy in zone, some games you're heavy in power. You just didn't have any type of identity or clear plan or who you are as a run offense. I think he wanted to be multiple. It sounded good in his head. They had good box counts, but they couldn't execute. And I think that will improve significantly with this team coming forward with guys like Aaron Cromer and Mike Shula influencing what's happening on this offense. I think you're going to see a better run scheme, and I think that's going to lead to better consistency. So I still think this is going to be a Josh Allen wide receiver-centric offense. I think you'll see a more effective run offense, but I still think the Bills understand that their bread and butter is throwing the football and putting heat on the other team and stress on the other team to keep up. Next one comes from Michael, who says, this isn't a question, but something I thought was interesting. I don't like the early bye week, but one thing I noticed is our 3 longest road trips all come before the bye. If you use Google Maps driving directions, we travel 5,224 miles before the bye and only 2,040 miles after the bye. That's an average of 871 miles per week before and 186 miles per week after. It's a good point. And then we talked about this last week about how, the early bye is not a great thing and how the past Super Bowl champions have all had later buys and how that's something the Bills will have to overcome. So I think you make a good point here, and that's especially impressive because the Bills play, 6 games before the bye, which means they play 11 after. And so even considering that, you have that big of a discrepancy in the travel stress on the team. That's an interesting point, Michael. I appreciate you bringing that up. And then also we should point out that the Bills have somewhat of a mini bye coming out of week 13, where they play on Thursday and then Sunday, right? So a Thursday to a Sunday, that's like 10, 11 days between games. So it's the Patriots on the road and then the Jets at home. I think that's another big help in having an early bye. Next one comes from Ted, who says, Joe, a couple of questions for you. Number one, have you watched any film on Shaq Lawson or Jordan Phillips since leaving the Bills? They obviously struggled after leaving Buffalo. Has either player lost a step, or were they simply misused or miscast? What do you think reasonable expectations are for them in 2022? Then number two, we all know that Josh Allen is an excellent rushing quarterback. However, he often struggles with traditional short yardage quarterback sneaks. On paper, this is something that should be a strength. Do you have any thoughts as to why it's not? Does it have more to do with him or the O-line or both? What are the keys to being a successful short yardage sneaker? So I guess we'll start with number two, because I don't know that I fully agree here. That I think Josh Allen's a great short yardage quarterback sneak player, and I think obviously the Titans game stands out to all of us, but I think more often than not, Josh is great at quarterback sneaks and short yardage running. I think the keys to being a successful short yardage sneak, I mean, obviously your size, your power, all that stuff matters, but it really comes down to reading the leverage. Where are you going to have leverage advantages based on their alignment and your blockers? So I think that's probably more than anything. Tom Brady's not strong or physical or anything like that, but he's the greatest quarterback sneaker in the history of the game. And I think it's simply because he understands how to read the leverage and get where he needs to get. Now, as for Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips and some of their struggles since leaving the Bills, I think you have two unique situations with both of them. First of all, Jordan Phillips, he went to Arizona and had a ton of injuries, so he didn't even play that much. In fact, in 2 seasons in Arizona, he played a total, in 2 seasons, 550 snaps. In 2019 alone with the Bills, he played 583. So that's pretty telling right there. He didn't play a ton. And when he did, I mean, he was a 3-4 nose tackle. That is not Jordan Phillips, right? We know that. He's a 3-tech. He's a gap shooter, penetration style player. He just happens to be 340 pounds. So body type wise, he looks like a nose, but he's an athlete that doesn't necessarily hold up best in that capacity. I think he's a 3. And so I think he was injured and misused. And look, for those of you that are new to the podcast that don't remember the things that I said about Jordan Phillips in 2019, I like a lot about Jordan Phillips, but he's not a great run defender. He never really has been. And so asking him to be your 1-tech and eat blocks and hold his space and keep the second level clean, that's never been his game. He's a penetration style 3 technique. He just happens to be 340 pounds. As for Shaq Lawson, again, he went to a 3-4 defense in Miami, played 5-tech, and I thought he was decent for Miami in 2020. I really did. I thought he was a good player. And then he was traded for what seemed to be a significant asset in Bernard McKinney before that 2021 season. And then, he winds up being on Houston for a cup of coffee and goes to the Jets. He was okay for the Jets. So I think just kind of that bouncing around in 2021 hurt Shaq Lawson, but I thought he had a good year in Miami in 2020. And so I'm expecting these players to come back in and be part of the mix just like they were. Now, is Phillips going to play 583 snaps again? Probably not. But I think he could play 30 to 40% of the snaps and help this defense. I think the more interesting player is Shaq Lawson, where you've got Von Miller, you got Greg Rousseau. And then, to me, after that, between Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa, and Shaq Lawson, it's anyone's guess as to who commands the most snaps. And, I would guess that on a weekly basis, one of those players is inactive. So I don't know if it's a ride the hot hand, play the matchups. Is it really contingent on, the growth of Epinesa and Basham? All of those things come into play. But I can see Shaq Lawson anywhere from inactive to the third guy in the rotation. So it's going to be interesting. But I think obviously, and I mean obviously, Buffalo is the best spot for both of those players to be the best version of themselves. Last one today comes from Harry, who says, I love to hear your analysis of the Bills embedded video for the 2022 NFL Draft. Felt like it had so many good nuggets into the process and mindset, especially the look inside the meeting Terrence Gray and Brian Gaine had pre-draft. Interested in your perspective. So first of all, I love the embedded videos. I can't wait for them to come out, and I'm a geek, right? Anything Bills related, especially that kind of like inside look. I'm there. I'm eating it up. I love it. But there are a couple of things that I want to point out. First of all, it's team content, right? It's Buffalo Bills team content. They let you see what they want you to see, right? It's very specific. And so it's filtered. I'm not saying it's not authentic, but it's very specific what you get to see. And so they're trying to create a narrative through it. I think you just have to be mindful of that as you consume that content. I love it, but I'm also mindful of that lens. And so I guess let me respond to what you said about the Terrence Gray, Brian Gaine conversation. They kind of went to this thing talking about Kaiir Elam. I'll be honest with you, and I could be totally wrong here. But when I watched that even in real time, and then I watched it back, because you asked about it, I think that was very much acting. I don't think that they had cameras on Gaine and Gray pre-draft, and every conversation they had was recorded and they were ready for this moment. I think this was very much a after the fact, hey guys, can you recreate a very quick conversation about Kaiir Elam that we can repurpose for this content? I think that's more what happened. It felt like a very unnatural conversation between two people. And I've been around a lot of prospect discussions, and they're not like that. That was very much, it felt staged to me. And look, it was still interesting, but I felt like it was staged and more specific than anything, like a repurposed conversation that was after the fact. Because number one, I don't think they were recording all of those conversations to be used, right, eventually. And then number two, just kind of the feel of the conversation. It felt very purposeful. The other thing that I would take away from the embedded on the 2022 draft is I really do believe Brandon Beane went into this draft and didn't think that he'd get a player he would want at 25. I really do believe that he was fully intending and trading out of the first round. But because Kaiir Elam, one of the players he did feel comfortable with in the first round was available, he went and got him, right? He said, this is a player we're willing to take in the first round. This is probably the end of the list, and we want to make sure we get him. Let's part with this fourth round pick and go get our player. I do think that was what happened. I think the Bills, if Kaiir Elam or Trent McDuffie weren't there at 25, that the Bills would have traded out of the first round. Now, I'm not sure they would have traded far out of the first round, but I think they would have wanted to trade out. And I do think that Cam Taylor-Britt was a player that they were willing to fall back and get in the second round. I mean, you heard Brandon Beane talk about it. He said, we wanted to come away with a corner early in the draft within the first 3 rounds. And I don't think they were married to any specific possibility. I think one of the possibilities was Kaiir Elam or Trent McDuffie in the first round. But if they couldn't be there, Cam Taylor, Britt, or Alante Taylor in the second round. They were comfortable with either possibilities. And if they were to go with the non-corner in the first round, that would have come with additional assets from trading out. Now, I do believe that if they couldn't trade out, that they might have just sat there and picked Breece Hall, the running back out of Iowa State. I do think that was within the realm of possibilities. But I'm also very glad that it played out the way that it did. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow's going to be a fun one. I'm going to look at all of the major NFL awards and talk about the Bills' possibility of winning them, right? So Coach of the Year, NFL MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, and Defensive Player of the Year. We're going to look at all of those awards because the Bills have contenders this year. And in some of those categories, the odds-on favorite right now to win the award. So don't miss tomorrow. It's going to be good. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.